მოგესალმებით. მე ვარ Mamuka Kuparadze.
Hello, everybody. I am Mamuka Kuparadze, and welcome to Studio Red Discussion Show. And we are presenting it from a resort town in Turkey, Kemer. Yes, in this town, we, journalists from Tbilisi, Sahumi, got together. And one more time, we discussed the challenges in the media, respectively, and what cooperation we can establish between each other. That was what we talked about, and today we, four journalists, represent our show, and we are going to talk about that in more detail. So, let me tell you that our program is supported with EU and United Nations and European Union program COBERM, and that means confidence building and early prevention. Let me present our guests, Roin Agrba from Sukhumi, independent journalist, Zarina Sanakoeva, also independent journalist from Tbilisi, and in parallel, she contributes to Echo Caucasus, Manoni Bokuchava, a media expert and researcher and doctorand of Tbilisi State University. So, now we are going to start our discussion, and my first question is for Manon. So, please, Manon, what is the degree of freedom in Georgian media, and what, in your opinion, are the challenges through Georgian media? So, I'm asking this question just to be interesting for our colleagues. Our journalism has gone a long way to be independent and high quality, and given this long and hard way, I think we should have had more professionalism and degree of freedom, but at the current stage we have media that is under influence of government, media that is critically minded, and media that work according to high professional standards. So for me, media that is responsible, working according to international standards, I see in internet media, and unfortunately internet media is not fully available for massive population, and therefore it remains out of the reach of our users and population. Zarina, our viewers don't know anything about media in South Asia, and please talk about that and talk about the degree of freedom. Independent, commercial or private information actually wouldn't exist at all, and those governmental media that exist in South Asia, I can't say they are just impartial, but in any society, it's kind of a law, because if there is no competition, if there is no choice, they don't try to gain the trust of viewers or listeners. So the situation which we have there actually is based on this current situation, and let me tell you that to be specifically just assessing the freedom of degree, Zarina, as long as I know, before in South Asia there were just free media outlets represented by some radio station and media, some newspapers as well. In South Asia, no one has ever just abused or just pursued media outlets. The reason they don't exist is just purely economical. So actually, how can any media exist without any economic or financial background? This is actually why this is advertisement, but advertisement actually, without mass media actually cannot exist in a small country like ours is. Number one. Number two, no one is interested actually just to push their own interests, in terms of mass media. And only for this reason media doesn't exist. And yes, actually, we had some media just as they exist for some time, but they just existed only thanks to some donations and grants. I just worked there myself. Well, as for grants and donations, they didn't decrease, they simply just disappeared. And that experience which we actually had, it was very good and positive experience. And as long as we talk about this, we mean that, governmental, dependent or independent, however, I prefer to use official and non-official media, but actually just media, just to a different degree, actually depend on certain things. So, Roin, I'd like to ask you, as long as I know, I think media is more variety there's more variety and multitude, and they have longer history. In Abkhazia, just briefly, can you talk about those that are more popular and what challenges are?
История СМИ абхазская, фактически это некий такой срез истории развития вообще СМИ.
Well, talking about the history of Abkhazian media, the birth of certain media, their development, and unfortunately death. And why I'm talking about this? Yes, you're right, variety was and variety is. And choice and pluralism. Unfortunately, we had just long time, just not very long time of presidency, of one presidency, where just a journalist actually was pursued, but as it was said, free media actually survived and can survive only in conditions of hard competition, and if today this variety is not because of there are certain restrictions. For example, a very hard law about very just long wanted and hard law just on media. Points out the responsibility of a journalist actually for materials he or she presents. And today, unfortunately, newspaper outlets are less and less. We have two channels, one is private and other is governmental. And as for the degree of freedom, those experts and journalists who come to Abkhazia and as they say, actually, the degree of democracy actually is over the top. I would say it's a kind of overdosing, but, generally speaking, I don't know there is any journalist who would complain that his or her rights are restricted. On the other hand, thing is whether these outlets are actually able to survive. Just a lot of media actually goes to internet, to TV, and advertisers actually just go to newspapers less and less. But this is sort of mirror reflection. They just sort of moved into internet media.
Они создают зеркала, то есть электронные версии, и раскручивают электронные версии.
Спасибо.
Through our Abkhazian and Ossetian colleagues, we monthly get digest of news from Tskhinvali is Sukhumi, and let me represent these materials and let me just go back to our studio. 1626 August in Gudauta, on the 7th military base of Russia, International Patriotic Camp was held. ABC of Danger and Survival 2018. Participants were children from 7 to 14 years old from South Ossetia, Abkhazia and Russia. During 10 days, the participants gained certain different military skills. Actually, it was my dream to be in a military camp, and my father used to tell told me that he felt great in the army, and the girls don't go to the army, and I would like to experience that, to experience myself what boys experience. And except for this, among the participants of the camp, different competitions were held, and guys were shown films and concerts. The purpose of this camp is military and patriotic preparation before the draft youth, and a spirit of friendship and understanding between the peers of different countries. On the eve of 10 years of recognition of independence of Sukhumi, 2 days international conference was held in Sukhumi. 10 years of recognition, results, and prospects was organized by Foreign Affairs Minister of Abkhazia. Participants were guests and leading politicians and political scientists from Abkhazia, Southeast Asia, Russia, Germany, UK, Switzerland, Jordan, Turkey, and Israel. Republic of Abkhazia is ready for equal and respectful dialogue. Only this approach may contribute to mutual understanding and development of international contacts. In the current year, we are going to just implement the meaningful agenda and international policies that would contribute to development of international recognition of Abkhazia. Within the framework of the conference, 6 roundtables were organized on the issues of independence of Abkhazia. Development of Abkhaz-Russia, Abkhaz-Georgian, and Russian-Georgian relationships were discussed with the meeting with plenipotentiary and extraordinary ambassador of Russia to Alexei Dmitrianin from Department of Students of State University of Abkhazia. Participants were just Rector Elka Gvarami, professors of the university, and guests. Students had an opportunity to ask the ambassador questions. What would be the vector of development of Abkhaz-Russian relationships like? It was a question of one of the fifth-year student. It was answered that it would be development of economic and financial development, as answered the ambassador Dvinianin. Talking about Russian-Georgian, Abkhazian-Georgian relationships, the diplomat pointed out that dialogue is necessary, but only on the basis on totally equal state rights. August 8, a friendly match was held in Sukhumi between youth teams of Abkhazia and Nigeria. Abkhazian team won 4-0, and before Nigerian team arrived in Abkhazia, Georgian Federation of Football asked FIFA not to allow the match, and also to Nigerian colleagues, pointing out that it shouldn't be allowed to hold a match that goes against the principle of territorial integrity of Georgia. A Foreign Affairs Minister of Abkhazia, in its turn, asked Ethics Committee of FIFA to assess the steps of Georgia and clarify whether Georgia's steps comply with the conception of non-involvement into football. Despite the requirements of Georgia, sportsmen from Nigeria came and match was held. Late July, the general dispensarization and medical checkup started in Southeast Asia, and more than 7,000 patients underwent through medical checkup. Out of them, 2,500 are children. Doctors say that about 80 patients will be redirected to Russia's clinics to be searched with high technology equipment. After Tskhinval, Russian doctors also conducted checkup in Znauri region, and among the selected grown-up population, this were for the first time revealed TB and oncological patients, and in parallel, children are also medically checked up, where they revealed the high degree of firstly revealed diseases. As a intermediate stage of the medical checkup showed, it's necessary to develop the system of Medicare of Southeast Asia that would allow to more efficiently reveal the diseases among the population, and of course the purposeful screenings to be made just to reveal specific diseases. Participants of the summer cultural educational course, Ethnical Camp 2018 Steps of the Islands, today they were offered excursion around the capital of the Republic, and they put flowers to the chapel on the memorial cemetery in the school number 5, just to eternalize the victims of Georgian aggression. And talking about the war of 2008, it's not possible not to remember the heroism of Russian Federation peacekeepers who were first to take the blow of attacking Georgian army. The participants paid homage to heroes, having visited the statue to Russian peacekeepers, and they just visually saw the horrible steps and traces of war. I mean, the Tower of Georgia tank, and within the framework of the program, the Steps of Violence, they three currents of associations from all over the world visited it, and many of them noted that it's not their last visit to the historical motherland. Today, Southeast Asia is eternalizing the tragical events of August 2008, when Georgia started large-scale military operation against peaceful population. The war started with unexpected shelling of Georgian artillery night on the eve of August 8. Among the casualties of peaceful population of the Republic, warriors and Russian peacekeepers. Before the start of military operation, President of Georgia Mikhail Saakashvili declared that he had made a decision to cease the fire, but by the time the army had already received an order to conduct the operation named Clean Field. This year, all over the Republic, there are events dedicated to one of the most bloodiest tragedies in the history of South Ossetia. This is a museum of the burned souls on Zari Road, and the main symbols of which became vehicles destroyed together with passengers trying to leave burning Skhin Valley. And traditionally, 7 August in the evening, residents of Republic got together on near the stairs of Gergiev's steps. Every year, thousands of citizens get together and lighting candles in memory of those killed by the hands of Georgian aggressors. 13 years and 4 months, the residents of South Ossetia had been waiting for this day, and finally, today solemnly was opened Skhin Valley Dramatic Theatre, named after Costa Hitakuro. Actors had almost lost hope for revival of the theatre. For many years, they just had been working in very hard conditions, but despite that, they tried to make our viewers happy with their performances, working on the temporary stages. And now, the theatrical square, they solemnly open the new dramatic theatre. They assure that everything will be different in new theatre. Along the red carpet, President Anatoly Bibilov walked together with People's actresses Ludmila Golovanova, and a new dramatic theatre was opened after the fire. We are back on air, and let me remind you that our discussion is being recorded in Turkish town Kemer, where Georgian, Abkhazian and Ossetian journalists we get together. We have just seen media digest from South Ossetia and Abkhazia, and this is the way our colleagues send us this information. They think that just we lack this kind of information that could be interesting for our viewers. Manon, let me ask you another question. So it's very interesting to what extent actually we are interested in Abkhazian and South Ossetian information, and what is the degree of demand in Georgian society for this information? I think that Georgian society is interested in this information, but the thing is that media just tries to just point out just screaming and hot topics. If anything is highlighted about Abkhazia, well, they only highlight some kind of problematic situation. But the way just community development, some positive things, young people, how they get education, actually we don't know anything about that, about this kind of issues. And today we have established just new generation that knows these communities, just much worse than others, and I think this issue is becoming more and more problematic, and Georgian media, I think, should watch and should pay more attention to this. I think that's important for us. Thank you very much. So I think that we have just a few media organizations that try to highlight realistically and properly the issues and events in South Ossetia and Abkhazia. Well, as you know, actually it's hard to sell for media, and I think this is a reason. And secondly, I mean, subjectively speaking, still our society is traumatized about these issues, and our society is not quite happy to hear about the success, for example, in South Asia, Abkhazia. That's my point of view, and it's interesting to know whether just South Asian community is interested in news about Georgia, and what kind of news actually just is interesting for South Asia. And also we would like to know about the just degree of this information.
По своей работе у меня есть такая рубрика, каждую неделю я делаю.
Weekly, I have a rubric of voices. It's in my just private program. Well, and I try to show something relevant, actual. And in one report, actually, I pointed out, and I just asked people what they thought about parliamentary elections in Georgia. And just even in the last elections, just I tried, what do you think, who became president of Georgia and what it would mean to us? And practically no one among the present or just among the people I just stopped in the street, I mean simple people who I just met, I mean just passers-by, no one knew actually the name of president of Georgia or who became president. And the most important actually message is that actually let them do whatever they want to do. We have nothing to do with that. That was their main message. And as for the community, well...
Совершенно. И вот что касается общества, я считаю.
And do you think it's true? Do you think is it this way, or it's maybe just position of respondents based on our political relationships?
Я считаю, что это на самом деле так, потому что я сужу не только
I think that it's true. I mean, just according to those people, actually, just I recorded, and according to general situation, I mean, current situation, I mean, talking to people, and as for the media outlets, well, I would say that more or less they support some interest, but still they commented the way, I mean, the things happening in Georgia, and not necessarily just what actually can be relevant for us. Once I pointed out during one discussion, when we were discussing those things, let me point out that there are some materials where just in a distracted way they just put out some things about Georgia, for example, using hate speech or violation of journalist rights and things like that. So this is, I think, highlighted, especially, for example, Georgia received another batch of weapon, or Georgia is maybe celebrating some anniversary. Yes, for example, mostly about if they think that it actually concerns South Asia. Roin, tell me please, actually it's very interesting, as long as I know, and we talked about this before, I mean, interest is equally less in Abkhazia about the processes in Georgia. Please tell us what is interesting still, just about among things in Georgia, and when Abkhazian media show some interest for Georgia.
Я несколько лет назад делал такое исследование.
A few years ago, I just conducted some search and some documentary as well. I mean, just I mean, the way Abkhazian media just highlights news in Georgia. And as Zarina said, except for one politician who was president, Mikhail Saakashvili, actually no, just a single respondent knew any just name of any politicians. It's not people who you meet in the street. I would say that these are just famous journalists or just political scientists in Abkhazia. And talking that, Georgian news badly highlighted, it would be saying nothing. It's not highlighted at all. For example, if the news is related with NATO military drills or just some drills of Army of Georgia, actually it will be definitely highlighted in media, and media of course will write and highlight about those things. To be honest, actually, I'm not sure whether the last parliamentary elections were highlighted or not. Of course, they know, but only superficially, only through Russian media. Who is actually in power in Georgia? Georgian Dream. That national movement lost elections, and that's all. Good or bad, I think it's hard to say. It's hard for me to judge, but actually, personally, I'm always interested. I'm always trying to keep myself posted, and if there is no necessity, actually, for citizens who are end users, I think that in Abkhazia, a very just low percent is interested. Therefore, journalists just actually creating their own products, I think they simply sidestep these issues.
Создавая собственную продукцию, медийную продукцию, они обходят просто эту тему.
ჩვენ გვაქვს კონფლიქტი.
We have conflicts with Ossetians and with Abkhazians. We want to establish this conflict. I know that the Abkhazis, the Ossetian also want to establish. Despite that, we all just, with three sides, look at this differently. The purpose of conflict resolution is different. We cannot escape our relationships. We are not politicians, but however, Zarina is political scientist by her education, and I think Zarina would also just comment. In this case, conflict must be resolved. We are neighbors. We willy-nilly we have some relationships with each other because we are neighbors. Despite that, we have certain just controversies. So strict communities. Sooner or later, I think we will have to deal with. Is it normal that we are not interested? Shouldn't we become more active, or who just should intensify this? Shouldn't we just overstep these barriers by journalistic ways, or what we should do?
მექანიზმით, ჟურნალისტური მეთოდებით თუ რაღაცას უნდა ველოდოთ. როგორ ფიქრობ შენ?
პირველ რიგში ვიტყვი იმას, რომ მე რატომ
First of all, I don't think that we are not interesting for Ossetian and Abkhazian population. I have friends in Abkhazia and Ossetia, and they ask me a lot what's happening in Georgia in science and culture, some part of the population. But however, there is interest about us, and what we can do as media, we talked within the framework of your project, about peace journalism. I think peace journalism is the only format through which we can have some relationships. We colleagues between each other. This is a format which actually just would contribute to creation of some peaceful ideas. However, I understand that our colleagues may have some difficulties from this point of view, and maybe for their community it may not be just acceptable. They may not want to speak publicly about that, but this is not an easy task. We first of all should show to our society that the tragedies that happened actually injured all of us, and a lot of people actually now have much worse life. There are families who went through horrible tragedies and hardships, and I think we should show this history, and we should show that we want development, we want peace in the future, and we understand that we people have a very short time in this world, and we should help each other to make this time happier and fruitful for each person. I think you have the impression that there is certain vacuum, that someone is trying to isolate others. For example, I know that architects are interested in some kind of architectural things in Georgian architecture, for example. Doctors also just through internet try to gain some information. I mean, some professional interest definitely exists, and people are interested. Of course, I'm not saying that it's fully closed, fully shut down. For example, people just intensely discuss situation about security. I mean, security on roads. I mean, definitely Georgia actually made progress to make situation improve. I mean, security on roads and I mean, just law enforcement system. For example, our community very often actually discuss reforms of law enforcement just system, which we actually demand from our president. I mean, we want them to actually change and reform the system. And often we hear the comment that, for example, Georgia did that, Georgia did this, Georgia made progress, things like that. Of course, medical things are just, just often judged and discussed. Everybody understands that if someone, for example, has a critical medical situation, of course, it's better to take them just to Georgia. So, you see, and it's pointed out that in medicine, Georgia just reached this or that kind of progress. And so, it's not always negatively, actually, pointed out. Negative appears when we read and hear through networks, for example, because they are just easily available. I mean, our just newsfeed and friend line is very long, and every one of us actually just has actually availability to Georgian media, and people are interested, people just deal with each other. I mean, so there's no isolation. And for example, legalization of easy drugs, it's highly just debated in Abkhazia, and for example, part of that even just welcomes it because we have very hard just legislation on the use of drugs in Abkhazia. For example, I mean, what you have legalized for us, you can have you can get 3 or 5 years of imprisonment, or those things like, I mean, sexual minorities in Abkhazia, it's totally just taboo. No one wants to speak about that. And some of our users or journalists, sarcastically point out that just, you see, Georgia, it's something like just gay rap and things like that. I mean, so I mean, point of Georgia, just to different degree, really exists.
То есть тема Грузия в той или иной форме все равно существует.
And Zarina, what other subjects can journalists talk about to local media users? I mean, if they can be more active, I mean, journalists.
Но здесь же опять бы я сказала о том, что, к сожалению, если мы говорим, чтобы было интересно журналистам.
Well, as I said, unfortunately, just most of all, actually, just news should be interesting for our just editors, because I mean, absolute majority. I mean, only just few journalists can actually decide on their own what to write about, and it should be pointed out that I would say that people carefully just watch news about the negotiations, about the issues of opening just a transit road through Lars. I mean, whether the road should be closed or whether it will be closed or not. So this topic is hotly debated, by the way, I should point out. And and they closely watch, for example, those responsible, governmental officials, and And I think that people just are interested, actively interested in things like that. But as I said, I mean, military issues actually are hotly highlighted in a negative way. I mean, and of course, security issues. I mean, some people just claim that Georgia actually still just has some revanchistic just moods, and Georgia will attack if anything, and things like that. So I think it's also just highlighted by our media, rather just hotly, and I think that's all. If there are some kind of very screaming and loud statements by Georgian politicians who want to come to politics, and if they express their opinions about just regarding South Ossetia, this is also highlighted. But I mean, the degree is very, very low. Actually, I would say so.
Но очень мало и вяло.
Thank you very much. So let me just offer one more block. I mean, our colleagues from Abkhazia Ossetia also just sent us the results of media monitoring, and Nino Gelashvili will talk about that. She's our journalist. Hello everybody. In August, together with our Abkhaz and Ossetian colleagues, we continued our media monitoring. Traditionally, we watched how just Georgian-related issues were highlighted in Abkhazian and Ossetian and Georgian media. Our Abkhazian and Ossetian colleagues write us that in August, their media just especially often used hate speech toward Georgia, which was caused by the 10th anniversary of 2008 war. Information agency OSINFORM publishes the article under the name "The War Military Crime of Georgian Nazis in August of 2008 and Other Video Services." In the media, Georgians are mentioned as aggressors, and also it says that Georgians just widely destroyed historical and architectural statues and looted the local population. War did not continue, did not last long, but it was very wild and violent. Ossetians assess it as a genocide because Georgians wanted once and for all clean South Ossetia of Ossetians, says the leader of movement Abkhazian Mothers for Peace and Social Equality, Guli Kichpa. Like Ossetian media, Abkhazian media also just mentions Georgian in war-related materials as Nazis, fascists, nationalists and aggressors. The Foreign Affairs Ministry of Abkhazia urges Georgia to say no to the policy of escalation of tension. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs expresses its worry about the growth of Georgia's military and technical potential. According to their assessment, this creates danger both for Abkhazia and for peace and stability in South Caucasus. Due to the support to Georgia, Western countries and NATO are also criticized. As for the Georgian media, in August, naturally very relevant was the issue of 2008 war, and a lot of materials were prepared about the casualties and about the current situation. However, it should be noted that hate speech towards Abkhazians and Ossetians was not used in the material. It should be also noted that sometimes aggressive are those users who leave their comments about those materials. A negative approach mostly is addressed to Russia. The members of the government point out that Russia continues the occupation of Georgia's territory. That's all today. See you later. Bye-bye. So we are back in the studio, and let me remind you that our discussion is being recorded in Turkish town Kemer, where we Georgian, Abkhazian, Ossetian journalists got together, representatives of those groups. Four people, we are here, and we speak about media, about issues and challenges before media, and prospects in this region which we represent here. My next question is, for Roin and Zarina and then Manon, I'd like to know, you are just very brave journalists, you just bravely and freely write what many journalists actually don't even dare to write about in South Caucasus, and I'd like to know your opinion. Despite these challenges in our communities, we are just alienated by conflicts. Do you think it right that we should develop journalistic relationships? Do our communities need that, and would it contribute to conflict resolution?
ეს თუ შეუწყობს ზოგადად კონფლიქტის გადაჭრას ხელს.
Обычно говорится в таких случаях, если когда пушки умолкают.
Well, as you know, just when actually cannons actually shout, culture is silent. It's a proverb, but actually any conflict, any war starts and ends just through journalists, firstly, because journalist is a profession that just brings and sends to readers their own views on these or those issues. And if journalists don't communicate, don't have any contact, of course, any conflict would get worse. According to my personal experience, I remember quite well the relationships between journalists in the 90s when any journalist from Tbilisi could call me to my press service, and of course, we would answer just any question, but now it's simply disappeared, and there are only just relationships, only networks, and those social platforms just provided by international donors. Of course, contacts are necessary because according to my experience, I remember a lot of fake information when people simply just blow out conflict. It's easier when your colleague calls you or writes you that they think telling you this thing happened or did not happen. On the background when fake news actually just spread around. I think colleagues should first of all trust each other. Without any trust, I think it's impossible to establish professional relationships between journalists and reporters, and these relationships, these contacts must improve the relationships between us. We just talked that there is too much negative, and what is happening in Abkhazia, South Ossetia, people don't know. But if some good things happen in our countries, if bad things happen in our countries, all media actually just would scream about that. But if there are just any success, why would Georgian journalists turn blind eye to that? Journalists want to sell just hot things, hot dogs, so to speak, so that to just makes their end users happy. Therefore, contacts are absolutely needed and necessary, and I would be very honest. Those famous Georgian journalists I deal with, step by step, I can see how their rhetorics change. Given that before they had just aggressive rhetorics about just occupation, about occupants, now I can see that their rhetoric is becoming more soft, and also our journalists use more soft language, more moderate, and more just careful. I think a lot depends on us, because people read us, actually just we may influence actually the mood of politicians and push them on these or those decisions. That's why actually contacts are needed.
Пойти на те или иные шаги. Поэтому контакт, естественно, нужны.
So, Zarina, what would you say? To what extent relationships between journalists and reporters, exchange of information are needed?
Давайте я пока соглашусь со всем, что сказал Роин.
Пожалуйста.
Да, я учитывая все это, я уже этого не буду говорить, я считаю, во-первых, что...
Well, let me agree with everything, with what Roin said. I think that, what the journalists do in Georgia, South Ossetia, Abkhazia, well, I think, first of all, other people should assess the activities of the journalists. I cannot name specifically them. So I think we should see the results. It's a rhetorical question, and but what do you personally think about that? I think we should be based on these results. To exclude any emotions. And secondly, the way I look at it, well, I have repeated many times, and I will repeat it now. The motivation of my work, just based on my contacts and in my projects, just getting information. Well, I well remember a situation between 2008, how the situation was developing during 2 years in South Ossetia. We just monitored that. In Georgia, they just had created, how it would call, government of South Ossetia, or just alternate government of South Ossetia. And they even just started the negotiations with South Ossetia, and they started just presenting it as a government of South Ossetia, and they tried to isolate these communities from each other, and informational vacuum actually appeared. This was preparation, and I am positive that this was the main stage for preparation of what happened 2008 in August. Information vacuum brought to what happened, and I think it's my personal responsibility. Let me tell you, I'm a resident of Georgia. That what just realistically is happening. I want to know that I did what I could do. That information which I could bring around, I did. It does not mean that what you read just on just news websites, it's a lie. No, it's not like that. But if some information, for example, if some official site writes something, some news, and I write the same, somewhere in Georgia or in Western, I would be trusted more than to that official site. Despite that, they don't write lies either. And most important motive for these contacts and for these mechanisms, of negotiations and contacts.
Существование вот этих механизмов переговорных и общения.
Еще я добавлю, что, к сожалению, то, что я наблюдаю еще, что во время общения со своими...
Actually, according to my observations, I'm talking to my colleagues, I noticed that many of them think that we are all just victims of search and just propaganda machine, and we are just brainwashed by just channels of Mr. Kiselyov or Solovyov. Actually, we ourselves negatively consider this brainwashing, but when you turn on Georgian channels, I can watch 2 or 3 minutes, and I think I'd rather just turn it off. I prefer to turn it off because I think that many people there in Georgia think that we are victims of propaganda, we are puppets, and we just get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and walk in military style according to comments. But I want you to know that, degree of civil society is very high. No propaganda works there. Of course, it happens that sometimes if you think that everyone is puppets there, for example, some wrong decision of Russian administration actually just meets a lot of opposition among our journalistic communities. And I want Georgian communities that we are not actually victims of brainwashing, and we are not just TV zombies. And I mean, degree of freedom in Abkhazia, it's not worse than in Georgia, if not better. I mean, just degree of civil society.
Это гражданского общества. Вот. И, ну, собственно говоря, вот.
დიდი მადლობა. Manon, როგორც მოვისმინეთ ახლა.
Thank you very much. And Manon, as we have just heard, our colleagues also think that we should cooperate, I mean, between Georgian Association and Abkhazian journalists, and they think it's important. But they also just experience some inequality when Georgian journalists, to put it mildly, don't highlight it properly. We know that in our media, just sometimes we use abusive language, wrong and non-ethical assessment, talking about toponymics, and in some events we often like to actually pull the rope to our side, but shouldn't it be considered by us, and what can Georgian journalists offer to Ossetian and Abkhazian journalists? So how can we cooperate with them? Well, from our point of view, I think that in our relationships we have no problems based on that we love our profession and we easily just communicate. Moreover, if we had more time just for communication, we may become even friends, because human relationships can be established, and it doesn't matter who, I mean, ethnical, just actually roots don't matter. Another thing is to what extent we are brave to tell our community. I think Georgian community would easily accept if I tell them that, for example, I am friend with my Abkhazian colleagues. I mean, Roin understands Georgian language. We should not call them puppets. Of course, I agree. And of course, there are different degrees of journalists, both in Georgia and Abkhazia too, but therefore we cannot consider everyone just under one and the same context. But propaganda is, of course, very problematic issue, both for Abkhazia and for Georgia. There are journalists that are under the influence. However, it doesn't mean that everyone is a puppet and repeats that narrative that is offered to him. But still, this problem exists, and good journalism is to find some way out and offer a better product than your colleagues do. And cooperation is an opportunity to double-check the information, to be objective, to be ethical, and offer your audience just proper information. If you have just availability to call your colleagues and double-check, that would contribute to objective informing the society. It's so important that international community should help us to meet more often, more contacts. We are not very old generation, but now young generation is growing. Students, and they should have some contacts. Not to be led by some stereotypes and prejudices. Not to do things that will just further alienate our community. Thank you very much. I think it was very interesting for our viewers, and we just talked about many interesting things. And one is when you personally just listen to your colleagues. And so now let me finish our discussion, and let's keep our hope that our relationships will be just more deep and will be more fruitful. That will really contribute to actually just our communities to listen to each other, to build the confidence. The rest, I think, will depend on politics. I think we would reach politics too, and I think we will live long enough to see the resolution of the conflict. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.